Hello everyone, I am Ankit and you're watching StudyIQ IAS English. In our today's video, we'll try to understand a very interesting topic called as singles tax. So what is this singles tax all about? Is it a tax that single people pay for their single load? We'll find out in our today's video. Now the notes that I will be using in this session, in case if you want to download them, you can go to this particular Telegram channel called as ETS Live. And while you're in this channel downloading the notes, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel also. So let us understand why have we picked up this topic, a very interesting one for that matter, for our today's discussion. Now living alone is actually associated with a sense of freedom. So basically if you're living alone, you can live in whatever way you want. You can live wherever you want. You can even decide to drop something on the floor of your house and next thing you know, few days later you'd find the same thing in that exact spot. So how do you think this is happening? Because you're living alone. So this is a kind of freedom you get. But do you know actually this living alone, for the freedom that you're getting, it actually comes at a cost. And the cost that you're paying, it is what is called as singles tax. Now, globally, there has been an increasing trend that people are trying to, or people want to live alone. And this is the cost that they are expected to bear, called as singles tax. So this is what we are going to discuss today. Now, why have we picked up this kind of a discussion for a UPSC related video, you might think, right? Just look at this question which appeared in 2018. A commodity, if it is provided for free by the government, then what is the opportunity cost? Similarly, this kind of a question based on one or the other aspect of singles tax might appear in the exam. So we must be able to solve this question, and before that you need to understand the topic. Okay, so let us start our today's discussion by understanding the concept and definition of singles tax. Is singles tax, first of all, any tax imposed by government like other taxes like GST, income tax, corporate tax, etc.? The answer is straight away no. It is a metaphor. Singles tax is not an actual tax, rather it is a metaphor which is associated with the extra financial burden a person is expected to bear in case or if they are deciding to live alone. Now this represents a structural cost any person has to bear if they are living alone. For example, if you rent a house for 30,000 rupees and you're living in that house alone, you're basically paying per person 30,000 rupees as a rent. Now imagine two person is living in that home and they are paying the same rent, that is 30,000. So what is the per person cost now for rent? That is 15,000. So this shows you that you're paying extra just to live alone, and this is what singles tax is all about, because you're not sharing this cost with anyone. You're not enjoying the economies of scale that you might in case if you live with a family, in case if you live with your friends. And this is a big cause of concern. Why is it a big cause of concern? Because our cities, our economies, our entire social structure, it is designed for people who are living with someone, who are living in families. And this assumption that people are living in families or the way economy are designed are actually discriminating against the people who are living alone. And this trend is going to become a bigger trend as we move forward. People are trying to prefer to live alone across the globe, not just in India. So that is why we are going to understand this topic in somewhat great detail. Now let us understand few more examples of how a person who lives alone ends up paying more than people who live in togetherness or people who live in families. Now one of the examples I gave you was relating to housing. So suppose if you are in a housing market and if you live alone, the most common forms of houses that you're going to find are 2 to 3 BHKs, right? In India, mostly there is a culture that you'd find very less amount of studio or 1 BHK apartments. So suppose if you rent a 2 or 3 BHK house for you to live alone, you end up paying an extra rent for a space that you might not even need. And similarly, as 1 BHKs or smaller apartments are lesser in number, so you end up paying for a 1 BHK apartment, which is not just the 50% of a 2 BHK cost. And if you rent a 1 BHK apartment, you'd realize that you're paying about 70 to 80% of the money that you would have paid as a rent for a 2 BHK flat. So this higher rent that you're paying for living alone or lack of smaller units of household, it shows you that the society is not designed for people living alone. Similarly, let us consider utilities. Now, suppose if you're living alone and you're using an AC in the room, right? Suppose if one person sleeps in that room, the AC would run throughout the night. Similarly, if two people would sleep in that same room, AC would run throughout the night. So the electricity cost would be same. The internet cost that you might be using would be the same. But if you only are one person living in the household, you're bearing the entire cost of those utilities, which might not be the case if you're living in a shared household. So singles end up paying more for their utilities. Also, let us consider grocery and food deliveries. How many of you singles living alone try to order from apps like Blinkit and Big Basket? You'll realize that if you that if you buy something of a very less amount, you have to pay what is known as minimum order fees. And similarly, if you live alone, you'll have a habit of buying groceries in smaller packs. And all of us know that bigger packs of groceries come at a cheaper cost per gram or per 100 grams as compared to smaller packs. So this is a premium you're paying for not buying in bulk. You won't be able to enjoy economies of scale. You would end up paying high surcharge or high delivery cost for ordering small amount of items. Similarly, social expenses. Now imagine you're living in a family, so you'd obviously interact with your families and this would give you a social setting. Now, on contrast with it, imagine you're a single person. So the options or only options of social recreations that you would have is to go to a mall, go to a nightclub. And when you try to enter a nightclub alone, you'd have to pay a stag fees, or even they might deny you the entry. So what I'm trying to say, that if you're living alone, you'd have more outings, which would add to the cost. To pass your time, you'd buy more subscriptions of Netflix, YouTube. So in a way, you're spending a lot more money. Similarly, even living alone comes, or you have to pay a mental or temporal cost. Suppose if you're living alone, so you'll have to take care of every household chores as against people who are living in a shared household where people might share 1 or 2 household chores among them. So you end up spending a lot more time doing the household chores, and this actually comes at a mental cost. This comes at a physical cost that you have to pay. So all in all, you end up paying not just more money to live alone, you end up paying more of your mental health, more of your physical health just to live alone. So this is the core driver of what is the concept of metaphor, which is called as single stacks. Now, this is an expanding demographic trend, not just in India, but across the globe. Now, India's census survey and NSO data show that there is a steady rise in single person urban household, and this is a trend which is more seen in tier 1 cities, where people actually migrate from their households in tier 2 or in villages and they live alone just to make a professional career out of it. And globally also there is a trend in this direction. And this is because of multiple factors. First of all, with development, people are trying to delay their marriages. Urban migration is one of the reasons. Because of the cost associated living in urban areas, people try to stay away from their family, which also adds to their singlehood cost or the single stacks that they pay. Similarly, just to maintain an individualist lifestyle, people try to associate less with other people. So this also adds to the broader trend why people are trying to choose to live alone in urban areas. And I've told you this comes at a cost. What is this cost called? Single stacks. Now let us go deep into this topic. What are the different dimensions, or why is this a problem? Right. First of all, let us start with structural and urban dimensions. I told you in India there is an urban planning bias. There is a limited supply of smaller households which are affordable for people living alone. So if you end up living alone in an urban city, naturally you end up paying more as a form of rent, as a form of your living expenses. Similarly, there's also an economic design flaw. If you realize, most of the commercial pricing models are oriented towards sharing. They are trying to penalize solitude. Just for example, consider YouTube Premium. If you buy YouTube Premium for yourself, you end up paying 149 rupees per month. And if you buy a family pack of YouTube Premium, there you are paying 300 rupees, but that will allow you to share that subscription with 4 people. So if you buy a YouTube Premium for 300 rupees, essentially you're paying about 70 rupees per person. And if you are buying a YouTube Premium alone for yourself, you end up paying 200 rupees per month. So this is an economic design flaw, which inculcates discounts on a larger packs, which inculcates couples discounts, which inculcates family plans, right? Similarly, there's also a sociological factor associated with it. Now, there is a cultural expectation, at least in India, that singlehood is a temporary phase. Eventually, you'll end up setting in a family, right? So this is not, people have not trying to inculcate this idea. People have not trying to understand this idea that there might be a possibility that a person did not want to start a family. That person might choose to live alone, but there is no orientation towards it. So this is the structural and urban dimension. Most important dimension is economic dimension. I told you, when you live alone, you have to pay alone for utilities, packaging waste, housing, energy use. And this means that per capita consumption of resources is more in case of people who are living alone, and this adds to the kind of expenses that you bear. Similarly, people who live alone, their kind of spending is higher on a general basis. They end up spending more for house, utilities, social creation, and as a consequence of higher spending, their savings rate is low. So this is the implication of singlehood on economy. Now, this also in a way reinforces the existing inequality that exists in our society. For example, one of the prominent inequalities that we face is inequality in terms of housing. So the ownership model, the rental markets in India, they are oriented more towards people living in groups, people living in families, and they are trying to price out singles for it. So there is also possibility that if you are living or trying to live alone, and if you don't make as much money, you would not be able to afford a kind of a house in which you want to live in. And this eventually would drive models like which would favor co-living models. Okay, so this is the economic dimensions. Now, usually people think that it is basically the premium that you're trying to pay as a singles tax, which is a cost associated with you living alone, because the benefit you get out of living alone is kind of social independence. But is this belief true? Actually, in my opinion, it is not true, because beyond financing, there is also a mental and emotional cost that you're paying to live alone. First of all, if you live alone, you're more prone to loneliness. You do not have adequate social structures which you get if you live in a family, and therefore you are more vulnerable in cases of illness and emergency. Similarly, there is also a phenomenon of urban alienation. Paying more to live alone in an urban area would also make you socially peripheral. So you won't have peoples to rely on in cases of difficulties, right? So this is a mental and social cost that you're paying, in addition to the cost that we have discussed in the previous slide, economic cost. That is a cost. All of this is added to singles tax, right? So basically, one of the key instances that people think that if you live alone, you're paying a premium to live alone, it is okay, but this is not just the only premium. You're also paying with it in terms of your mental health. Now, there is also a gender dimension to it. The singles tax that men and women pay, both are different, and it is more brutal on women in particular, because single women, if they're living in urban areas, they face multiple difficulties. First of all, they get difficulties when they try to rent a house, and if they try to rent a house, they also have to ensure that this house is located in a secure area, and for that you have to pay a higher rent. Similarly, if they have to commute to their work, commute anywhere, they can't afford to take public transport, or even if they can't even try to take a shared transport. So for that, or for them to be safe, they have to take, or the only option they have is to take a cab. And all of this comes at a premium price. Similarly, women living alone might face more social scrutiny. They are trying to, or there are people who try to impose moral conditions on them, that you can't wear this, you can't eat this. So all of this is a cost that a single woman might pay in a family, adding to the gender tax or adding to the singles tax. Therefore, what I'm trying to say is that singles tax can be more brutal, can be heavier for women, especially if they are living in urban areas, if they are living in conservative societies as compared to men. Now, the biggest moot point of our today's discussion is what is the policy and economic lessons that we get from this discussion. Now, we need to understand that singlehood is a trend which is likely to continue in near future, and it is only going to expand. So our urban and fiscal systems must be made adaptable so that it takes into account of different and varied social structures. First of all, what we need to do is we need to incentivize smaller and affordable housing units so that people who live alone for social purposes, for economic purposes, they do not bear this additional financial burden. Similarly, we also have to extend financial models and economic models like utility and insurance plan, which are specially made for people living alone, so that the cost that they bear for paying for these utilities are actually not as brutal as they are today. Also, we need to give tax breaks, we need to give rental subsidies for single occupants, especially for elderly and women. This is a big problem that our society is going to face. So why should they pay premium for a cost that they are already bearing? So in that way, we can encourage co-living, we can encourage community housing, and as this will be a sustainable and inclusive alternative to the problems that people face right now. Okay, so this was our today's discussion relating to singles tax. Before we try to solve a question, let me tell you a very important announcement. We are in a process of taking admissions in our resolution batches for 2027 and 28. Resolution batches are essentially foundation foundation batches. Here P2I means everything from prelims to mains to interviews covered. For example, I take economy classes, other faculties take their respective batches. So all the important subjects that you are expected to cover in UPSC exam will be covered in our P2I foundation courses, and we have two courses for students who are looking to give exams in 2027 and students who are looking to give exams in 2028. One thing is common in these, that if you want to make a payment, before making the payment, if you add the code ATS Live, it will help you fetch maximum discounts up to 7,000 rupees on all the courses, including foundation courses, including optional courses. So please remember that you can learn to thrive, but only with ATS Live. Now, before ending this discussion, I have a question that I've created exactly on the UPSC pattern. If the concept of single stacks refers to higher expenses borne by individuals living alone in urban area, then economically it represents which of the following options? Please do let me know the correct option in the comment section. The ones who get it correct would get a thumbs up from my side. And before ending this video, once again, let me remind you, the notes of this session will be available on this particular Telegram channel called as ATS Live. And if you have problems in locating this channel, you can always scan this QR code. Okay. So this is all from my side. Please have a very good day. We'll see each other again at 9 p.m.